Welcome everyone back after the lunch break to the Revolution in the 21st Century convention. We are here all day long, 12 hours, presenting you with a series of revolutionary events from the last sessions we just had on transforming our economic system based on current climate collapse scenarios, to workshops with scientists, with the media coordinators of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion. It's fantastic to have everyone coming along live to these sessions. We've had around 400 people come so far, and we're very welcome to join in. So for those who are just joining after lunch and haven't been here so far, maybe you're coming in from across the pond, welcome, Canada, US, good morning. The way this works is that you have the possibility to ask questions to our wonderful panelists via the Q&A or the chat. And then this will be live streamed to the lobby. You can also chat in there. We also have a cafe space throughout the day where you can also mingle and network afterwards. I've said a lot today, and I am very excited to present some wonderful speakers who are going to talk to us today about democracy. So this is one of the fundamental parts of revolution in the 21st century. What we want to encourage, what we've been working on, is building up the assembly movement across the world to say that democracy isn't just ticking a box every 4 years. It's being active, it's being participatory in your everyday life. So we have some fabulous speakers from different projects in the UK. We have Gully from Cooperation Hull, one of the founders of Cooperation Hull, and a previous rebel with me in Extinction Rebellion. We have Peter McFadden, who has helped set up the Flat Pack Democracy movement. We have Molly and Yaz, who are also joining us from Assemble in the UK, one of our sister movements, who are helping to push independent candidates and assemblies and a House for People this summer. So welcome to the 50 of you on the live stream, on the call, everyone else joining in from the lobby. And James Snyder also arrives. Fantastic. Okay.
Hello, hi everybody.
Welcome. Right on time. So we also have, I'm very pleased to say, James Snyder coming in, one of the political communication strategists for Corbyn and a general fantastic organizer. So welcome you all. I'll first pass over to Gully. You can say a little intro. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Hi. I can't see anybody apart from the people in the panel, so it's a bit weird. Sorry, but hello, people out there. I'm Gully. Yeah, I spent 3 years or so going hell for leather, civil disobedience with XR, as Robin said, and then stepped back from that. The last couple of years, I helped to start an organisation called Cooperation Hull in the tiny part of the UK in the East Riding of Yorkshire. A few of us moved there 2 years ago, and our aim and what we're doing is, hi Esther, that's nice. What we're doing is building alternative economic structures and alternative democratic structures. And beneath that is the idea of a culture of self-organizing, which we think is a condition, a necessary condition for revolution. So for us, assemblies are an important tool. Local democracy is an important aspect of that process, but not an end goal. They're hopefully a manifestation of our ability to self-organize. But for us, it's very much paired with building up a local solidarity economy so we can actually resource the outcomes of the assembly, so we can actually meet people's material needs, and lots of other things. But maybe that's enough from me. Shall I pass to someone? Peter?
Go for it. Go ahead, Peter.
Sure. Democracy, me talking about democracy, there's an irony because, you know, it'd be such a nice thing to find, wouldn't it? I think over the last few years, I've basically concluded it doesn't exist, and it is so nice to be talking here. And thanks for inviting me. I got involved in Frome, where I live in the southwest of England, about 15 years ago. I kind of accidentally got elected into our local council, along with 10 others out of a council of 17. So suddenly we had power. And none of us had been councillors before, and discovered that a lot of the things that people think we thought were rules are not rules, and actually particularly at this level, at a town parish level. A lot of the way that people behave and the things that happen is just tradition, which somebody once described as peer pressure from the dead, which I like. And actually, we could do way more than we thought we could, and others thought we could. So we kind of demolished the system and then rebuilt it in another way. And absolutely central to that was that we weren't experts. I mean, that was part of the whole, having sort of wandered into this by accident, to have then suddenly gone, okay, we are now, we're going to represent you because you've elected us. We know what you want, would have felt such a ludicrous position to take. So we didn't take that, but we did lots of things which were really cool and funky about getting people properly engaged in what now would be called people's assemblies or assemblies of various kinds. I think not perfectly, and there were loads of things that we didn't do right and so on. But there were loads of things we did do right, and then I wrote a book about that, which brought together a lot of those ideas, which has helped to inspire some others, not nearly as many as I would have liked. This isn't really, it's nice of you to introduce it, Robin, as a flat pack democracy movement. But, there are councils throughout Britain, and they trickle in. There's a couple of really interesting and new ones that have turned up with majorities that are looking to change things. So I've come to feel that the system doesn't work. It's totally dysfunctional in so many ways from top to bottom, and most of that parish town level is as dysfunctional as national government, which is an absolute aberration. But there are times when it can do some good, and it can also be a way in for other things, so that if councillors and councils see their role as being to facilitate the community rather than to represent it, then that presents an opportunity to really get some good stuff going within communities, which, as we've heard in other talks today, we're really going to need as the shit hits the fan in a big way. So I'm pleased with what I was involved in and what I still am involved in. I don't think it's not a way to take over the world, but if it can link into things like the great work that Gully's doing and others, then that's fantastic. That'll do.
Quality. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for throwing us into the democracy space. For those who are tuning in live, there are 100 of you right now, 70 in the Zoom, 30 in the lobby. Give some love for our speakers. We're talking about democracy here in Revolution in the 21st Century, a foundation, a bedrock of creating non-violent democratic revolution. Hey, look at those reactions going. I'm seeing hearts, I'm seeing celebrations. This is big love right now for you guys. I know it seems like there's just the 6 of us in this little online space, but we're also revolutionizing the convention space. We're bringing people together, having that conversation. If you do want to ask something to our wonderful panel of speakers, you can raise your hand. We can come back to you later or use the Q&A function. With that said, on my little hosty function, I will pass over to James to talk a little bit about where you see the state of democracy right now and what we can do about it. Go ahead, James.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. So I think that we are at the bottom of or at the end of a 50-year counter-revolution in Britain and around the world, which has systematically and aggressively erased all the democratic institutions that had been built up, or not all of them, but in a very large way, rubbed them out. And when I say democratic institution, I mean institutions, forces that can advance people's collective power. So that doesn't necessarily mean an elected body. It doesn't necessarily mean a government. It doesn't necessarily mean some mechanism for direct democracy or a referendum. So people's organizations, movements, trade unions, tenants' unions, peasants' unions, these are all, in my view, democratic organizations. These are not just that they have some form of internal democracy, but democracy is about people having more power collectively over their own lives, and these are the institutions that do that. So in the global north, we've seen, as we know, since whatever date you want to put on it, Callaghan going to the IMF in 1976, or Thatcher, or whenever you want, but about 50 years ago, there was the start of a dramatic counter-revolution, which has really unpicked most of the well-built-up institutions, which mainly were around the labour movement. But again, when most people think about the labour movement and they think about questions of class, they tend to only think about at work, which is, of course, extremely important place. But people don't only live at work, and the labour movement, historically, when it was advancing, when it was at its most democratic and winning for most people in the most democratic ways, was not just about work. There were cooperatives, there were of all sorts, there were libraries, there were working men's clubs, there were football clubs and brass bands, and a whole set of social power. Some of it seems more political, some of it seems less political, but it all knits together. It's all part of the same shared project to advance in not necessarily straightforward ways, to advance the interests of the overwhelming majority of people. In the global south, again, in the same time frame, again, where do you want to start it? You could start with 9/11 of 1973, the overthrow of Pinochet in Chile, but there are other dates that you can pick, where the project for national development in the global south, for sovereign development in the south, came under enormous assault and has been undone. So I want to situate, when we're talking about our democratic experiments that we can do wherever we are, in that context, that what we are doing is not building just new places where people can come together and decide things. We're building a whole new front of people's power through a whole series of different organizations in a whole ecosystem that has to have it has to be connected to each other. That doesn't mean necessarily always formally connected to each other, but that's the power that we have to rebuild. So this is in the title of this roundtable is Local Politics to Revolution. And I want to kind of deepen the idea of what we mean by local politics. I think local politics is not just engaging with a fundamentally broken, or it's working exactly as it's meant to, but it's broken for us, system which allows some power for some people in it for some of the time, but building of really deep power, as in trade unions, tenants unions, cooperative childcare, community kitchens, things which transform whole bits of people's lives away from the rule of either the state or the market, and into things which are democratic institutions, because they are people doing those things together themselves.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Yeah, I see a round of applause from Peter. I'm seeing a lot of love in the chat as well. I can see why you're a speechwriter, my friend. Thank you for laying out the context there. We need to deepen this work on many levels. Those are some great examples. Trade unions, community kitchens. I hope people are getting inspired. Now we're getting up to 150 people watching in live, inspired by some of this local politics to revolution and deep community work. One fantastic example of that I think is occurring right now in the UK is the Assemble movement. We've had a few comments coming in already. Robin from Fossil Free London, a great organization. How do we, confront such massive global problems with local politics, with local assemblies? I'd love to pass over to Molly next to talk a little bit about Assemble and how they're doing just that.
Thanks, Robin. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having us here today to talk a bit about Assemble and House of the People. So as we all know, we are living through a profound crisis on almost every front: social, ecological, economic. We are reaching limits, and climate breakdown really poses an existential threat to life on Earth this century. Genocidal regimes are raging on, and millions already can't afford to live. So trust in our political institutions has collapsed, and rightly so, to be honest, when just 1 in 10 people trust political parties and barely a fifth of the UK chose the current government. This system is built to serve corporations and elites, and as James kind of touched on there, it's not corrupted, it's delivering exactly what it intended to do, and I really think we're at the end of its curve. So we aren't just dealing with bad governance, and history tells us that fascism grows in conditions like these, and we see it is growing when systems stop working and people get desperate. They look for someone to blame, and we're seeing this already with the rise of the far right in this country, across the pond, the scapegoating of migrants and minorities. So there is another path, and we wouldn't be here today if we didn't believe this, because these moments of rupture are also moments where real change becomes possible. And Assemble is a project that's built for this moment. So we're not just tinkering around the edges, but we're offering a clear, radical alternative that's grounded in compassion, in common sense, and in collective action. And crucially, we're not asking for permission and are stepping up and building something that works because it's built by all of us and can revive those democratic institutions that, again, James mentioned. So Assemble's goal is to fundamentally change how decisions are made by using assemblies to upgrade our democracy and refuel our community democratic organisations, our cooperatives, unions, community spaces, and so on. And this starts locally in these simple but powerful neighbourhood meetups where people who aren't heard come together in a welcoming space to talk about what's broken, what needs to change. And these are inclusive, facilitated conversations that are grounded in people's lived experience and in a culture of mutual respect. There's food, childcare, music, to make the space as accessible and warm as possible, so not the usual political event. And out of those gatherings comes a community charter. So that's 5 priorities that everyone at the assembly, at the series of assemblies, agree needs changing. So assemblies are these transformative spaces that lead to action, and we've seen people in the hundreds that we've run who've never engaged in politics before show up, speak up, and get ready to campaign, stand as independents, and take collective action. And so crucially, they're not talking shops. They've held councils to account, and they've even helped to elect MPs in the last general election who ran on assembly-written manifestos where the candidate was chosen from the grassroots, so not the usual suspects, someone who might be a sort of self-selecting leader. And those assemblies are vital tools for working class people and minorities to shape politics, because they don't have the ear of politicians, nor do they see themselves represented, which is still a problem in the assembly space, which is still quite white. And so that's, you know, a massive problem for us to tackle in the space. But we see really diverse groups of people coming to these assemblies, and all of those assembly results are feeding into something bigger. So in July, from the 20th to the 22nd, the House of the People will sit for the first time, and that's a citizen-led national assembly. So you can think of it like a People's House of the Lords, but inclusive, representative, accountable. And our first major goal for that chamber is for it to replace the House of Lords, which is one of the UK's weakest pillars of democracy, which is captured by the state and the market. So that house will be made up of 100 people, 50 selected by democratic lottery, so that it's representative of the people of the UK, and 50 people nominated by those local assemblies. And over 3 days, it will review the concerns from across the country, hear from scientists, frontline workers, community leaders, and deliberate, all to produce the People's Charter, which is a new national mandate drawn from real life demands. And the sitting of the House this year will discuss key priorities which came out of the local assemblies we held up and down the country last year. And those were taxing the rich, taking urgent climate action, ending the UK's complicity in war and genocide, tackling political corruption, and upgrading democracy. And in Germany, their House of the People is actually running right now, which we've supported and helped to fund in Berlin. So if every country had an adapted version of the House of the People, very much led by their context, there is obviously enormous potential for a new front for people power internationally. And that People's Charter will set the stage for a wider democratic showdown. So on October the 13th, which is the anniversary of the suffragettes' rush on Parliament, we are hoping to bring people peacefully and powerfully to the streets to demonstrate outside the Commons and the Lords with the People's Charter, carrying it to Westminster to show that the public is watching. So collective action, grassroots mobilisation and potential non-payment campaigns on the basis of that national charter will follow. And Assemble will also be supporting independent candidates running on assembly mandates in the coming months to really build this counterpower to traditional institutions. So I won't go on for too much longer, but the House of the People, just to say, is not a one-off. It's a permanent institution in the making with regular sittings and a living link to community. So it's part of this bigger strategy for democratic renewal. And it has some really simple pillars, being citizen-led democracy, so ordinary people setting the agenda, protecting protests, so recognising that protest is a vital democratic right, facing the crises, ecological, social, democratic, trusting the science and building it together so the House grows with everyone who joins, and of course this underpinning demand to abolish the Lords. So this really isn't a think tank or a political party, it's a tool for all of us, and we are not asking for scraps from a broken table. We are getting together and building a new table all together. So if you'd like to be a part of it, you can enter the lottery if you're in the UK at www.houseofthepeople.uk and share it with your friends. You can donate. So we'll put a link to donate in the chat. We really not bankrolled by billionaires and need everybody's donations to make this happen. You can join the national team. So if you get in touch on our website, we need help with organising, training, mobilising, planning the event itself. And if you're here as someone with a platform, if you're a journalist, a writer, we really need help promoting this chamber. We need everyone. And we can see that these assemblies grow fast. We've seen it before. And we're in this inevitable period of transformation where all revolutions in history have had a political wing, and this is a key pillar in the transformations that are coming. Thanks very much for your time and for being here. It's an honour to be on this panel of cool people.
Molly, absolutely slaying it from Assemble there. Look at the love coming in on the chat and the reactions. I love this thing. Just pure hearts on my screen right now. Thank you so much. You just answered so many of the questions from the Q&A in one go with that epic open speech. We've even had a few people coming in who have said, I'm part of Assemble in Salisbury, and they find it a life-fulfilling process. Roxanne says, hearing about the House of the People brings a tear to her eye. You're moving a lot of people with this work, and it's, really touching. So thank you so much. Also, big up to Gully. We've heard that the Q&A for the BBC Question Time in Hull was fearless and rock solid, and apparently that's thanks to you guys. So well done there. And yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. We're now up to 150 people coming in live talking about democracy in the 21st century. How are we going to build up this revolution? How are we going to challenge the current economic and social and ecological crises we face? Molly mentioned a rupture moment, a time when we need to kind of, act rapidly. We also heard from that earlier in the day from the authors of the All In book about how we need to organize a revolutionary moment. So it's really exciting. We're all coming together. You can watch those recordings on the Zoom Events platform. Now, I'll pass over to Yaz to introduce yourself a little bit more about the Assemble project, and then we'll go into some of the Q&As. And just so you guys know, one of the ones that's coming up first is what are the major challenges for the Assembly movement going forward. So, Yaz, go ahead.
Thank you, Robin. And it's super cool to be on a panel with such legendary people. I guess I thought it might be nice just to maybe spark a conversation around, how we view power and how assemblies can be a tool to shift and challenge power. And I think how we see it is that there's a two-pronged approach that's needed from within and from without. So to challenge power from the inside, we believe assemblies can help create a new political entity where there are new kinds of candidates and representatives inside councils and the Commons who have the weight and the legitimacy of their communities behind them, and who are running basically a very different kind of operating system to the archaic politics of today, one which mitigates for elite capture, which keeps them regularly accountable to local people, and which in a way detaches their own the politician from their own personal, political, professional prospects. And in the general election, that looked like independent candidates. A year later now, it's new local parties such as the Southport Independents and the Newcastle Majority Project. And in the future, we hope we'll start to see a new progressive party movement, one that's fundamentally different to anything we've seen before, which we hope will act less like, a man at the helm of the ship saying, "Go this way, everyone," and much more like an enabling protocol, like a centre which serves to certify an assembly that has met some kind of democratic standard, whether that's to select candidates or feed into the House of the People or determine a representative's policy position, i.e. to get the process right, but not necessarily to fix the outcomes of that process. And then on the other side, you have challenging power from outside, predominantly through this idea of sustained mass protest, something which is such a strong evidence base for influencing the public's salience on issues desired to see meaningful change. And that looks like coordinated demonstrations, well-timed strikes, the stuff that Molly was talking about, collective non-payment of bills, and trying to use the container of our entire political system to rally campaigns and groups across civil society to work together. So, Molly's mentioned this example of the rush on Parliament, right? The suffragettes are now universally celebrated by the political and media establishment. We want to try and use that celebration to reconstitute the idea of the radical, selfish, climate activist, which is a very strong narrative and frame in the UK, into something more like the image of the suffragettes demanding basic political equality and representation. So the rush is about demanding politicians trust us. That's the wedge, Do you trust the people to contribute to the decisions which affect us? Or should we trust you to make all of our decisions for us? And that work looks like us talking to Palestine groups, to radical climate groups, to NGOs, trade unions, et cetera, to try and bring people out at the same time. And we've found that it helps to have a democratically created set of demands which align with different social campaigns. That's what we got to a certain extent outside of the general election. That's what we're trying to reproduce as well, or upgrade in this first sitting of the House of the People in July. The idea of using these demands to help coherently collaborate on different issues within a coherent container. And at the heart of this whole strategy is this entirely new institution to rival Parliament, this House of the People, which technically is a standing National Citizens Assembly to convene every couple of years, twice a year, every 6 months or so, listen to local assemblies, listen to scientists on the true nature of things, and produce this alternative mandate for government, a People's Charter. The central point about that idea is to create home for the energy of both local democracy groups all across the country, as well as the street and strike movement, right? To provide that legitimacy and longevity, and to capture and contain the energy, basically, from protests, but to prevent it from dissipating. This is a huge problem with social movements. And to help start a new sort of story that can inspire and ultimately create the conditions to replace the feudal, wildly unpopular House of Lords with citizens to directly write laws and transform the country and meet all these urgent existential issues. And we feel like the conditions are ripe. There's huge disillusionment with UK politics. There's rock bottom trust levels. There's a massive vacuum at the moment for the progressive left. And assemblies are a vehicle, a tool, which basically just they're just a format for a meeting with a particular purpose. And there's so many different destinations assemblies can take you. Rather than just having a couple of men speaking from a stage, actually everybody getting to contribute means that people experience this empowerment experience and find it easier to join in. And you only build a 21st century, revolution if you bridge the divides across society and cut across party lines and engage those who are most left behind. Which is, again, I want to shout out Corporation Hull, because you guys are at the leading edge of this work, the real nuts and bolts of this work on the ground. And that's really what it takes. And Kairos, by the way, I know you're doing this talk in Kairos on Thursday. So anyone who's in London, come to hear more about Cooperation Hull. I wanted to do a shout out for that because it's super cool. But anyway, I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Yaz. Yeah, you're getting a lot of love. People really want to, shout out that work and to hear more, from Cooperation Hull. How are you guys? I'm trying to jumble together a few of the Q&A questions here. How do you get people involved in this work in such difficult conditions when lots of people are, not voting? I think Hull has one of the highest rates of not turning out to vote. How do we keep people involved? Maybe shout out the waffle, which is one of my personal favorites coming out of Hull. Yeah, go ahead, Gully. What do you think?
God, do you know what? I don't fucking know. Nobody knows. I want to bring a bit of frankness maybe to the conversation. I'm scared that so many people have heard about Cooperation Hull and that people have heard of Waffle, I'll Pay What You Can restaurant in Hull, in Yorkshire. I love what we're doing, and I believe in the slow building work that we're doing. I think it's a signal that not enough of that is happening elsewhere, that we get so much attention. I hate it. It's really worrying that we get so much attention because we're really small. And I think the question in the chat, what's the biggest challenge for the assembly movement? For me, it's like thinking of it as an assembly movement. And I know we've all said assemblies are a tool, but then we need to be clear about what the other tools are. Assemblies are not a magic pill, unfortunately. I think I started this work a couple of years ago thinking that maybe they were, and then we ran 13 assemblies in a year all around the city, using them, experimenting with that as a tool. And they can be a bit magical. They do produce a bit of magic. My friend said that they are spaces where the culture war dissolves, and that can happen, and that is really important. But they have to be embedded and connected to so many other things, and so that is the challenge that we're working on now. Some of the things that James mentioned, like what are the other building blocks of an actual new way of relating to each other, to money, to food, to building a different kind of economy, different relationships of exchange, all those building blocks, how do they become democratized? How do we democratize every aspect of our life? And that, unfortunately, is slow work. That is a lot slower than I think what some of us are looking for or working on. And it's not a criticism, it's just what I've had to learn coming from XR in particular. Like, it is slow building work, and the main reason it is slow is because, like, the biggest challenge for us that I've encountered from speaking to hundreds of people in the Hull for the last 2 years, as you said, it's got the lowest voter turnout in the country. It's easy to say that people are apathetic. It's deeper than that. It's that we have, James talked about like the history and how we've lost all these democratic institutions and that. And it's deeper than that. It's the spirit. It's inside us. It's the belief that we can decide something, the belief that we can do something, even the belief that I have a right to participate in a conversation, even the practice of saying my opinion and listening to somebody else's. All of this has been stripped from us. And I'm sure it's the same in other neglected parts of the country as it is in Hull. And that, unfortunately, I don't have a magic pill for that. It's like, but that is one reason why the economy, to call it that, a solidarity economy is what we're calling it, is a really important part, because people need to not only be able to meet our own material needs, obviously, because people are fucking struggling. So in order to engage with these big ideas, we need to meet people's needs, but also so people can believe that assemblies and all of these things actually do something in the real world. So if I turn up and knock on someone's door and say, we can do this, like, come to this assembly, the potential is massive, we can transform the democracy, blah, 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 revolution, they say, yeah, great idea. Like, what's it going to do? What's it going to achieve? So I guess I want to say, that for people who are interested in assemblies or interested in democracy, local democracy, and how that can connect up, I want you to start experimenting and for you to tell me what you've learned in how they can create outcomes, how those outcomes can engage with this assembly process, so that we can start to actually prove that this whole thing together can produce a different kind of system and a different way of living. Because for me, that is what revolution is. And if we're bold enough to use the word revolution, then I think we should have a revolutionary vision. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gully, for bringing us back down to ground with that one. You're getting a lot of resonance in the chat and love on the live stream for this idea of spirit. You know, it's a key part of what's going to keep us going in these turbulent times. And that long and deep work. I wonder, Peter, if you wanted to follow on from that and say some more.
Well, I think that's absolutely fascinating, and it's so typical of Gully to bring us back to earth in that way. And to recognise those struggles. I spent a week with, Cooperation Hull last year, and I learned so much about exactly those struggles. And listening particularly to Molly and Gully earlier, I'm really interested in that interface between existing politics and what you're trying to do. So when you were talking about, Molly, about Assembly putting up independent candidates, about engaging with the process, and I know that Cooperation Hull has too had that question, should we try and get people elected into the system? So I'm really interested as to, particularly Assembly's running a parallel stream now, or it's like, well, fuck it, we're going to do it our own way. We're going to have our own House of Lords. We're going to do this thing and show what can work, which is brilliant. But yet there's also this nibbling into the system. And so how does that work? And at what point is there such a big risk that you get usurped by the system that your initiative then gets weakened? And I think that applies to both, but I'd really love to hear from Molly, and I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards, Molly, because we're bound to run out of time.
Yeah, go on, Molly. Do you want to say a bit on that? And then maybe, James, you could also say a bit more how it fits onto your view of the wider political vision or spectrum right now, with the possibilities of a new left and alternative party, more independent candidates coming up. I'm very interested in how that plays out. I'm sure many people watching are too. Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really important question, and one that we talk through a lot, and with these ongoing conversations with figures like Corbyn and Jamie Driscoll, who are beginning to hopefully to see a launch of a new left party later this year, and there is this tension where, when we're saying it's a parallel parliament, a dual power, pitting ourselves very much outside of our traditional political system, what we're really hoping for is a conversation between the House of the People and a new party, which would fundamentally alter how a party operates. So this would mean that local candidates would be more accountable to their assembly than they would be to a national party whip, for example. What's to say that other political parties couldn't use the mandate from the House of the People as the basis for their party line too? All of these questions, which I'm sure many of you watching are thinking about. And these are, ongoing live conversations, but ultimately we need to move away from a political system where the top party line is decided by an elite few in central London, but where a party has deep roots that go far beyond into the north of England, to places where currently, even if there were to be a new progressive party, a lot of people around the country have given up because they see that their representatives really are operating from this the incredible strong values that came from the 70s and 80s socialist movement, but they've really lost faith in the process as much as the policies, particularly when we're seeing these crises deepening and the enormous scale of transformation that a new left party will have to enact in terms of decarbonisation, demilitarisation, if we have any shot at our survival in this century. So I'll pass to James to speak more about it, but it's obviously a huge question.
Well, I want to start with what Gully was saying about, and the work sounds incredible, and it's like, that's really, really the work. And of course it's harder than we all think. And it it has to be. I mean, if it were easy, all of that, I mean, I think you get spirit through having people's institutions, democratic power of various forms, because then you see that you can have power in your own lives. And beforehand, that was built up through decades and decades and decades of hard work. And so there's no, like, if we just there's no like one clever trick to rebuild all of that. And I think what you're doing is unbelievably phenomenal. How it relates to a possible new party, and the issue for me really has to be, and is it genuinely a new type of party? Genuinely a new type of party. That doesn't mean like a different vibe. That doesn't mean like it's a bit more federal, or it's a bit more localized, or it's a bit nicer. Like, does it have a different theory of change? Because all of the parties that currently exist in Parliament all have the same theory of change. The Green Party, Labour, Reform, the Tories, Lib Dems, Plaid, SNP, they all have the same theory of change, which is you form a party made up of members who think similar enough things to each other to fund electoral campaigns, to have a parliamentary party where politics is focused primarily on Parliament, and then you can win some reforms in the direction that your people want it to go. And we have to have a different type of party than that, which means that I think most of its work has to be what Gully and co are doing in Cooperation Hull, rebuilding democratic people's power, social power around the country, is the primary strategic task. Yes, of course, that means that you will run in some elections and you will put forward the alternative argument and have national campaigns and take on reform and all of that stuff. But that's the stuff that that latter stuff is the stuff that everybody knows, that's in front of you, and it's not that hard. Like, it isn't hard work. Like, going up, having some people go on the media and say progressive things and running elections. I've run elections. Those things are not particularly difficult. But building the underlying power on which all democratic advances are built is the difficult work. And so if the party is going to be really a big net positive, it has to be different like that. Now, that is never going to happen automatically, because the level of consciousness among particularly let's say the post-Corbyn left, the Corbyn left, us who were involved in the leadership of the Labour Party, is not fully in that place. So it's going to be a huge effort from tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the country who think that taking over a disused community centre and running political inflected power building things, whatever that could be, whether it's a community kitchen or a collective creche or somewhere that bulk buys things so that people can have cheaper things that they need in their house, whatever it is, think that that's more important, and that's what they're going to focus in, and that's going to be connected through the party. I just want to say one more thing. I know this is about the local, but I want to connect it up into the international as well, because what we're doing will necessarily have to do that. And I know it feels in Britain that we're not we're in very bleak times, but we don't feel like we're in revolutionary times because we don't yet have the power to do that. But in the world system, things are moving much faster, and the shape of change is coming much faster. And we, in our revolt here, our mutiny against the system, our attempt to build in Britain, the real movement to abolish the present order of things, that has to be the wing, the allied wing to the broader thing which is happening in the South, which is the reclaiming of sovereignty. And that is, in world historical terms, the most important thing that is going on in a progressive sense, in a reactionary sense. It's climate breakdown. And I think we just need to be aligned to those things. So I think it was 1967, Che Guevara said in a letter calling for a world revolution against imperialism. Obviously, we're at a different time. He said it's not just we don't just want one Vietnam, but two, three, many Vietnams, i.e., major fronts against imperialism. And I think a struggle now in the world will be building the equivalent of not like one OPEC, but many OPECs, so that the South can control its own resources, and us in the North have to be allied to that and also build our own many everythings. We need not one corporation whole, as Scully was saying. We need many, many, many of these things all over the country, in every community, building real power. And it's not automatic. If we build power, it doesn't automatically become political power. But you can't have sustainable political power if you don't have an underlying base of people really having some power in their own lives. Brilliant.
Thank you so much, James. And thank you all so much for coming along and having this discussion. This is so powerful. I'm seeing a lot of love from the people watching on the live stream, wanting to get involved, challenging established ideas, people wanting to watch this all back over again because it was just so juicy, so rich, so filled with good information. If you do want to support this work, please check out rev21.earth/support. We've raised £5,500 today already for the project, and we are getting dozens of new regular donations in. This really helps support all of this work. We are with one family, with Cooperation Hull and Assemble, and we'll be building up this revolution going forward. Thank you all so much for attending. I will see you in the next session, which is two available ones. We have one on embedding nonviolence in our movements with Buddhist teachers Yanai and others. And then we have another session with myself and Peter Tatchell and Assad Rehman on hope and history in the face of collapse, talking through historical examples and what we can do about it. Thank you all so much for coming. Take care.